Welcome to the target stream for MintPress News. I'm your host, Robert Inlakesh. And as always, thank you to everyone for joining us. Israel has refused to withdraw from southern Lebanon, advancing further into Nabatea, and as a result, falling into massive Hezbollah ambushes, triggering one of the most deadly battles of the war yet. And Washington appears to be frustrated and pushing back against Tel Aviv, which has everyone asking whether the US is finally putting Israel in its place. But before we begin, the target stream is 100% viewer funded. In the last 2 years, we were financially targeted and banned by PayPal, and our fundraisers were taken down by Indiegogo and GoFundMe. They even withheld our funds. So we're looking for 300 new members to keep this news show alive. You can join MintPress on Patreon or right here on YouTube and join our membership program. We are up against a Goliath corporate media propaganda machine, so we do need to fund an independent people's media to keep the public informed. And so everyone is aware we are doing these live streams every Monday and Thursday, 4 p.m. CST. So make sure to tune into both. So we have a lot to get through today, a lot of confusion that is being spread about what is currently happening when it comes to the Memorandum of Understanding, which is very explicitly not a deal, we're told from the Iranian side and also the US side. The US side more trying to argue that the war is over and everything is done. Iran is more hesitant to put that forth, but a number of developments have happened. It's very difficult, obviously, for many people to track down what is really going on and find any decent analyses of the current predicament, because, of course, it is quite confusing. Well, that being said, we're going to get into all of that and more today. The latest is that Mujtaba Khamenei, who is the new supreme leader of Iran, issued a statement saying that he gave permission for the Memorandum of Understanding, but he had his reservations, which has caused some problems amongst the Iranians, because initially when the deal was sold to the public, it was said that Mujtaba Khamenei was on board and that he had fully approved it. And just so everybody knows, before we go any further with this analysis, inside of Iran, they have the National Security Council, which has to approve things like this Memorandum of Understanding. They approved it, but only in the second hearing. So they voted on it once and it failed. They voted on it again and it got through just slightly. So there are many critics inside of Iran of the deal. And the main reason that people are critical, other than the fact that many of the lawmakers, many senior officials believe they could have got more from the United States, is that they are very hesitant about trusting the United States to actually stick to this agreement, which we're going to get into, because there's been a lot of focus on the Trump administration and it's what seems like it's pushback against Israel and putting Israel in its place. And it's quite interesting how things are evolving there. So this right here is a telltale sign that things are not exactly, the Iranians are not ecstatic about what has happened. Another development came. We've heard that no final decision has been made on the Iranian delegation's trip to meet with US officials regarding the Memorandum of Understanding in Switzerland. And according to Al-Mayadeen, that trip has actually been canceled, according to their Iranian sources. And the reason for that is because the Israelis continue to violate the Memorandum of Understanding, the ceasefire, by not only saying that they will not withdraw from Lebanese territory, but also that that they continue escalating. They're escalating their attacks. Netanyahu has said very explicitly that Israel will not withdraw from southern Lebanon. Instead, they want to remain in what they call the behind their yellow line, which is this part of Lebanese territory here. So with Israel not withdrawing, Hezbollah is not going to stop firing. That has been made very clear by the organization inside of Lebanon. They will continue to resist. And there is an enormous battle that is ongoing because Israel is pushing forward further towards Nabatea and trying to take the Ali al-Tahir hills area, a high point, and they are attempting to advance. And Hezbollah has been crushing that advance, which we'll get into a little bit later in the show. But there's a few clips, and I want to just break this all down because, again, I've said this many times, but it can get a little bit confusing. And there are a number of different potential explanations for what is going on. We'll get into them all. But the first clip we're going to pull up here, everyone has been commenting on this, is of JD Vance. And we'll take a look at what he had to say here today.
Now, I saw the Axios report, that Netanyahu is fuming. That's not reflective of the conversations that I've had with him, but maybe he's saying something to somebody else that he's not saying to me. What I will say, and this does bother me, is that you've seen people within Bibi's cabinet who have come out and attacked the deal, and in some ways very personally attacked the president of the United States.
I'm just going to stop it there because note when these officials are talking and they're pushing back against the Israelis, they will not explicitly, normally, insult Netanyahu. They'll go after the easy targets like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, the security minister and the minister of finance, who are renowned for being sort of a little bit crazy, quite frankly. And so they'll go after those and not even name them in this case without actually going after Netanyahu and confirming that Netanyahu is even angry with them. He won't even go that far. But it is interesting nonetheless what he is saying here.
United States. And I guess my message to them would be twofold. Number one, Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world's superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world. And the second message I would give to some of those cabinet members, Bibi, to his credit, has not gone down this path, but to some of these cabinet members in Israel who are attacking the President of the United States, the other thing that I would say is that over the last 3 months, 2/3 of the defensive weapons that have protected your homeland have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump. And anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the President of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in. Thank you all.
So, of course, a lot of people have pointed to this as a change in rhetoric from JD Vance. But JD Vance is somebody that has broader political ambitions and knows that the hardline pro-Israel stances of the Trump administration is hurting his own popularity, for one. Also, there has been an actual drop in support amongst Israelis after this deal was announced for Donald Trump. There was an overwhelming support amongst the Israeli population for Donald Trump. Then suddenly when the memorandum of understanding was announced, and now it's very low. I think it's 30-something% according to some polls. I believe Israel Hayom, which is the most widely distributed Israeli newspaper and owned by Miriam Adelson, Donald Trump's top backer. But that doesn't necessarily reflect the reality between the two administrations, which is something I want to get into. And to illustrate this here, and we'll go into the deal and what it actually means as well. But just to illustrate this, here's some clips also of Donald Trump speaking recently. And we'll go through these. I'll address what he says here. And then as well, we'll put this side by side with something else so that people have a little bit of a perspective.
And one way or the other will do it. I think Israel can do a much better job on it. Syria would love to do it. I was very responsible.
Here he's talking about taking out Hezbollah, so defeating Hezbollah inside of Lebanon. This is what he's referring to when he's talking here.
For the gentleman at Syria that's now the president of Syria, he's done a tremendous...
The funny thing is he doesn't even know his name, so he which is hilarious because he met with him, but he doesn't know his name. So obviously he's Ahmed al-Shara, or previously Abu Muhammad al-Julani back in his days as the head of Syria's wing of Al-Qaeda, and then also he was a commander in Daesh as well. So, but he doesn't even know his name, which is quite interesting. But I put him in power. Sure you did, Donald.
Job. He's put that country together in a year and a half. Sort of like our country, a year and a half. It's pretty similar size. They said, please don't put him there. He's a very violent man. Al-Qaeda. They said, well, I know one thing, a Boy Scout's not going to work. And he's actually done a very good job. He'd love to go.
Just, I have to pause it there because he's basically advocating that the former head of Al-Qaeda, in his own words, would do a better job in dealing with Hezbollah because of the way that Israel goes about it. And he's been very explicit. He's been very vocal about the fact that Israel will kill too many civilians. Al-Qaeda is better than Israel, is what he's saying here.
You know, Hezbollah is an enemy of his, and he'd go in but he wouldn't knock down buildings every time he hears there's somebody. He'd just go and get them with precision. But I don't know that people want that. Maybe they don't. Maybe Lebanon doesn't. We have to be guided a little bit by Lebanon. And by the way, the president is going to be coming, Prime Minister, President, going to be coming over to see us very shortly, over the next week or two. Good man. He's, you know, man is living. What a tough life he's got, because he's got tough groups of people. And it's amazing. Amazing there is a Lebanon with all they've been through. They have been treated worse than just about.
There's just like Rubio in the background there, just like hating his life. Even though, you know, he's a war hawk himself, but like just having to listen to Trump, you know, babble.
I think anybody disrespected incredibly. Israel's fighting Hezbollah too long and too many people are being killed. And you don't have to knock down an apartment house every time you're looking for somebody, because there are a lot of people in those apartment houses, and they're not all Hezbollah, that I can tell you. And I suggested to Israel to let Syria take care of Hezbollah. Because to be honest with you, I think they do a better job of doing it.
So Trump here, obviously this has been taken, and what he's about to say as well at the end here, that without us, Israel wouldn't exist and all of the rest of this. He said this before, right? He said that that without us, there wouldn't be an Israel. He's repeatedly said that. That's not new. But this criticism of the way Israel conducts war is perhaps something new-ish. And I will show for reference some of what he did when it came to Gaza, so everyone is aware that this doesn't necessarily mean there is a significant break between him and Netanyahu. Now, it could do, but just so everyone is aware, he's making these criticisms here, which is a very interesting take, because they're continuing to do it. They continue to violate your own red lines that you set. They're continuing to screw up the negotiations because they strike Beirut. You know, this is what the Trump administration is complaining about. They strike Beirut and take down an apartment block every time you're coming close to doing a deal with Iran. And yet you're still not able to discipline them and put them in their place. The most that the US president can do in this case is complain about it. But that being said, we'll get more into this.
Without us, without the United States, there would be no Israel. Without me, there would be no Israel, because no other president was willing to do what I did. I've had a great relationship with Bibi, but now Bibi has to be more responsible with respect to Lebanon. Lebanon used to be a great country. It was a country where you had professors, doctors, lawyers. The great intellect was in Lebanon. Now it's terrible.
because they don't have doctors and lawyers in Lebanon anymore. This is like his brain trying to come up with what makes a good country and a bad country, I guess. Of course, there are many doctors and lawyers in Lebanon still, although it has, of course, suffered immensely.
I would say of all countries, they've been treated the worst. And they can't defend themselves. And they have Hezbollah, which is...
And here he says they can't defend themselves. Well, whose fault is that? Just to pull this down. The reason why Lebanon can't defend itself is because the US basically controls what the army can do. It supplies the Lebanese army, and it prevents the Lebanese army and the Lebanese state from ordering those armed forces or them getting the training and the equipment to be able to defend themselves. So the reason why Lebanon, the Lebanese army itself, cannot defend the country, and everyone in Lebanon knows this, it's not controversial at all, is because they're not allowed to, and because of US intervention. That's why. And that's been the case. And it was the case when South Lebanon was occupied. The Lebanese army was not there to fight the South Lebanon army and to expel the occupiers. No, the United States, again, would not allow that to happen. So when he's like, oh, they can't even defend themselves and they've got Hezbollah to deal with. Hezbollah is a direct result of the fact that the Lebanese army cannot defend Lebanon because of the US. But again, this is a president that has absolutely no historical depth. He doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to politics. But that being said, let's go for the
problem for them. So, no, I'm not happy with the way Israel has handled themselves with Lebanon and with Hezbollah. They should have been able to do the job faster. It just goes on forever. And when that happens, it throws a negative light on the big deal, and that's the deal with Iran.
Okay. Now, this clip that I'm about to show was from June last year, or just after June last year. This, and take a listen to what he's saying here, okay? Bear in mind, after this, he just bombed Iran. This clip came out day after or so. He bombed Iran and then forced a close to the 12-day war that Israel initiated against Iran last year. And just to remind everyone, some people watching may remember this, but this is just to remind everyone this was what he was saying.
Iran violated the peace agreement and the ceasefire agreement. Do you believe that Iran is still committed to peace?
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
Okay, so everyone is aware that's a clip from last year after Trump came in, bombed Iran's nuclear sites, and then closed down the war. He closed the war, then that's the statement that he had. A year later, or less than a year later, of course, he was launching a strike alongside Israel and fought for 40 days against Iran. So when people bring up Donald Trump's rhetoric at the current time and what he's saying as evidence of a split between Trump and Netanyahu, personally, I don't buy it. Now, are they on worse terms than they have been in the past? Perhaps. It's plausible to believe that. And is this deal in of itself necessarily a good deal from the perspective of the Americans and the Israelis in terms of them gaining a victory? Absolutely not. And we know that because we have the outline of the Memorandum of Understanding now. We know that Iran gets most of what it was asking for. But bear in mind, this Memorandum of Understanding comes in phases. There's a 60-day period. And initially, when Iran and the United States agreed to the temporary ceasefire, which was 14 days long, the United States had agreed that all of these terms and a 10-point plan, which was put forth by Iran of its demands, was going to be something as a basis for the ceasefire. And then it went back on absolutely everything and it imposed a blockade on top of the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. The United States started bombing, of course, Iran, but the Strait of Hormuz was not about to open because the Israelis, which were the biggest problem here, the Israelis immediately went and bombed Beirut with hundreds and hundreds of strikes all across the country at the same time. Within the span of 10 minutes, Israel killed at least 303 people, most of them in Beirut. So Israel immediately violated that temporary ceasefire agreement. Iran was saying, we're not going to open the Strait of Hormuz. And for all of this time, we've been in this state of limbo because initially they delayed the negotiations because there was the 2-week negotiation period. Then they delayed it. And they came together and we thought maybe there would be an agreement. Maybe there wasn't going to be an agreement. They had their negotiations in Pakistan. That happened. But none of those initial clauses were respected. None of Iran's demands were respected. What is happening now with the Memorandum of Understanding is that there has been no deal that's actually reached yet. What's happened is that a proper version, a more legitimate version of the temporary ceasefire is now coming into effect. But again, what is happening is Israel is trying to tank it, right? So Israel wants to get away with remaining inside Lebanese territory and continuing its attacks inside of Lebanon when it chooses, while the Strait of Hormuz is open and while the US gets all the benefits. And so the US is handing over and making or pledging to make good on a number of Iran's demands. For instance, getting access to the $300 billion reconstruction fund, unfreezing Iran's assets, making it easier for them to trade oil, which there's some ins and outs of that, which we won't get into now, allowing them essentially to have control over the Strait of Hormuz. So Iran and Oman will be the ones that, in essence, control the Strait of Hormuz. That wasn't the case before the war. The United States has had de facto control in the Persian Gulf up until now, up until Iran imposed its blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. And as part of the Memorandum of Understanding, all the fronts are going to freeze, including Lebanon. They're very explicit about Lebanon. But Israel is saying no. And so this is the big dispute right now. The problem is Israel cannot go along with this, even if it's not going to work, because it's political suicide for Benjamin Netanyahu. But the reality is setting in on the Trump administration that there is no good way out. I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to invade Kharg Island or Abu Musa or one of these islands, Qashem or whatever it is? That's not going to open up the Strait of Hormuz. You're just going to sacrifice soldiers. It's going to be a big, symbolic operation that's going to lose a lot of soldiers in the process and probably as well captives. That's not going to work. Bombing Iran's infrastructure right now is going to be terrible. And once you do that, once you take that step to go after Iran's power plants, of which, by the way, there's around 400 of them across the country. It's not an easy operation to take out all of Iran's power plants, which are built to endure war. And, its water facilities, its bridges, everything. When you start going after that critical infrastructure, then all the missiles are going to come back. And there's no way back. It's the point of no return at that point. So the Trump administration had to do something because short of any real strategy, and they don't have one, nor do the Israelis. The Israelis are failing inside of Lebanon. They can't even win against Hezbollah, right? Which they said they already beat back in 2024. They said they'd already defeated Hezbollah, but they can't defeat Hezbollah. So they don't really have a strategy. So they have to get the Strait of Hormuz open. They have to appease some of these Gulf states. And by the way, all of doing this, whether it's temporary or they actually mean it, it's making Iran the regional superpower. And there's just no disputing that. Iran is now the undisputed ruler, really, of West Asia. Because it has all the leverage. All of the Gulf states are lining up to improve their relations with them. Even you see the rhetoric of Saudi Arabia right now and others towards Israel. They're getting a lot more critical. And the power that Iran will have if this deal goes through, and the economic strength that Iran will have after it too, puts it on top. The Israelis, this was a strategic catastrophe for them. They wanted to destroy Iran and they wanted to achieve greater Israel. Now they're in this quagmire in Lebanon and they can't admit defeat. And Iran is going to come out as the top dog in the region. So of course the Israelis are not going to be happy with this. But the question is this genuine? Because Iran is getting most, not all, but most of what it asked for. And there are some complaints from the Iranian side as to whether they should have gone for this deal yet or whether they should have got more up front. And there's other things as well that they believe they could secure. But the reality is Iran has won in a way, or this is an admission of defeat by the Trump administration, which is why people have been sharing this around. Donald Gorbachev. Anyway, that aside, the Trump administration has not been able to pull off a victory against Iran. So the real question here is the United States actually pushing back against Israel? And so a lot has been held up. His rhetoric, for instance, how he's negotiating with Iran behind Israel's back, and people saying that, well, he's negotiating behind Israel's back with Iran. How could he do this? Iran, blah, 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 terrorism, all the rest of it. I will remind everyone that at a similar juncture, when it was coming to the agreement eventually signed with Hamas in Gaza by October 8th, earlier in the year, this is what was happening, right? The United States, the Trump administration, sent a delegation to sit down directly at the table with Hamas and talk with them. And Israel was complaining that it was left out of the equation and it wasn't able to get in on this, right? But then in the end, and this is the takeaway here, because if you look at this, like they ended up, Adam Bowler, who was responsible there for meeting with Hamas. The reason I'm showing all of this is because the Trump administration might do things like this. It might, at least publicly, it presents this way, that they're going behind Israel's back. You know, they're signing a deal independent of them. They're forcing Netanyahu's hand into something. But then when the actual agreement comes and it comes to putting his foot down with the Israelis, as we have seen in Gaza, and as I said at the time, when the Gaza ceasefire came into effect, he's incapable of actually forcing the Israelis to cease fire. Israel has killed way over 1,000 people in Gaza since that ceasefire and has never, and I said at the time, it's going to be stuck between phase 1 and phase 2, and it's going to be in limbo. And so he might have the odd moment of criticism for Netanyahu or for the Israelis. And he might even, it seems this way anyway to the public, that he's going around the Israelis. But the real question here is, how much is he going around the Israelis? And how much of this is about Benjamin Netanyahu in particular? That's one. Two is even if a deal is signed, how much power does he have? Can he actually get Israel to withdraw from the south of Lebanon? Or does he just talk about it and how he's not happy about it? Because in the case of Gaza, he was speaking a big game at the start when it came to Gaza and the ceasefire. But then he just does nothing. Everything is pro-Israel from there on in. As soon as Israel extracted what it wanted from Hamas, which was the prisoner exchange, nothing else had to be implemented. Nothing. And the US didn't even take it seriously. If you look at the ridiculous plans put forth by Jared Kushner and co., they just recycled old plans, and they presented them every few months as new, like as a reconstruction plan for Gaza. It was just not serious. And so you have to ask yourself the question, with this deal, will it go the same way? Can Trump actually tell Netanyahu to withdraw? Then there is a broader question. Is it the case that politically, inside Israel and its political system, that Netanyahu has become so deeply unpopular, he has no way to actually secure a victory in the war against Iran, he's proven a failure on multiple fronts, and his popularity is waning, and come the elections, which are suspected to be in September, he might lose, and he might know that he's going to lose. So will Netanyahu, in the end up taking a plea deal with Israel's president, Isaac Herzog, who put the deal on the table for him to step outside of politics in return for his corruption charges being cleared? Will he take that deal in the end if he cannot redeem himself? Now, Netanyahu is a fighter politically, and that's why he's stuck around for decades and decades. But maybe this is his last run. Maybe the political establishment inside of the United States understands that. And maybe that's why they're so openly now going after Netanyahu, going after his coalition, pushing back against them. And maybe what has happened here could be a kind of the inkling of a soft coup coming against Netanyahu, who has really consolidated power within the Israeli political system. That could be a possibility here. But all of this in terms of Trump talking to the Iranians and not letting the Israelis in, well, we heard that with Hamas. And Trump, he's speaking harshly of Netanyahu and saying he's angry at Israel. Well, we heard that right after the 12-day war last year. And Trump was still committed to backing Israel's war against Iran for 40 days. And it's a war, by the way, again, they're stuck in this circumstance in which they've been put. The global economy has taken a hit. We're not really seeing all of the consequences of that right now, but it was about to get a lot worse. And the United States has blown through half of its air defense stockpiles. It's blown through a significant amount of its cruise missiles. And if the United States wanted to wage a major war, again, it could take them about 10 years to properly prepare for that. They're not in a good position. Now, can they continue firing on Iran? Yes, absolutely they can. But how effective is that going to be, and what's the exit strategy? There isn't one. So whether this will hold or not, I think this is, I don't see any evidence yet that it will. However, there is a reality that's hanging over the heads of policymakers in Tel Aviv and Washington, and that's that there's no good options for them. But again, that's why the Iranian side, I believe, is quite vigilant, because they've been subjected to these tricks and psychological warfare before. And the Trump administration, again, talking about how unserious it is. Here are some talking points which were put out by the US government with the Memorandum of Understanding. And they said, no nuclear weapon, no full relief, like getting sanctions relief, which is written wrong, because it sounds like what they're saying is that if Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, they're not getting sanctions relief, which is hilarious. Just so everyone is aware, we did cover a few weeks back now the strikes that Iran committed against U.S. targets, right? And this is to demonstrate that Iran still has the missile capabilities to devastate U.S. targets. We covered the attack on Jabal al-Dukhan, which is inside of Bahrain. And there is a major long-range radar there that Iran struck, and the satellite imagery appeared to prove it. We had imagery from far away, which appeared to show smoke. Now we've got more close-ups of it. And again, that's the precision of Iranian ballistic missiles when they hit their targets. And they're able to attack U.S. Bases with great precision and attack the Israelis as well and project their power still. And the Israelis and the Americans can do little about this. However, again, the Israelis are not about to stop. Here's Netanyahu speaking publicly today about how he is not going to end the war in Lebanon. This is subtitled.
ואתגרים נוספים עוד לפנינו. ואלה דורשים מאיתנו קור רוח, עמידה נחושה על האינטרסים הביטחוניים שלנו, ובד בבד שמירה על הקשר החשוב עם ידידינו האמריקנים שלחמו לצידנו כתף אל כתף, ואנחנו מעריכים זאת מאוד. אנחנו נמשיך לנווט את דרכנו בתבונה ובשיקול דעת. נשמור על הישגי הממשלה, נשמור על הישגי המלחמה. אלה הישגים של עם ישראל כולו. כשם שהחזרנו את הביטחון והשגשוג לעוטף עזה, כך נחזיר את הביטחון והשגשוג ליישובי הצפון. זה מחייב שמירה על רצועת הביטחון בדרום לבנון, זה מחייב שלא נצא משם כל עוד צורכי הביטחון של ישראל, וחייבים זאת כי הרצועה הזאת מבדילה בין מחבלי חיזבאללה לאזרחינו ויישובינו. ובראייה רחבה יותר, אנחנו נמשיך לדבוק במטרה העליונה שהנחתה אותנו, הנחתה אותי במהלך רוב חיי הבוגרים. לאיראן לא יהיה נשק גרעיני.
So basically that's Netanyahu, trying to rally up his base and demonstrate that he is going to remain inside Lebanese territory. Again, the area he wants to remain in is here. Pull this up. This is where he wants to remain inside of Lebanese territory. And he says it's going to be like Gaza. Well, again, they are following the Gaza strategy in Lebanon. That's exactly what they're doing. They're destroying civilian homes, they're pulverizing everything, and they're wanting to ethnically cleanse the population. And they gave evacuation orders, in fact, to civilians around the Nabatea area. They told them to get out of their homes, and they ordered these mass evacuations. And this was not too long ago. And then they started pushing deeper, and now they are waging war. They're trying to push deeper into Nabatea, and they want to take the hills, the high ground that overlooks Nabatea in South Lebanon, after having crossed the shortest point between the border of occupied Palestine and the Litani River area. And so this is where, pulling this up, so this is where the major battles are occurring, and the Israelis are attempting to push deeper. They're based in Arnoun after having captured the Beaufort Castle area, which we've covered extensively. They really bragged about having crossed the Litani River, which is here. And again, it's not all that deep into Lebanese territory, but they've reached roughly about 10 kilometers deep at most. And this is, serious. They're continuing to escalate. They're continuing to push deeper into Lebanese territory. And all day we've been seeing the clashes. And in fact, within the past 24 hours or so, we've seen dozens of Israeli tanks and armored personnel carriers, jeeps, struck and hit. We've seen evidence of that. And reports of dozens upon dozens of Israeli casualties, soldier casualties, including a battalion commander and a series of high-ranking Israeli officers that have been either seriously injured or perhaps killed. Now, the Israelis don't admit a lot of their casualties, but we have been hearing of an enormous amount of casualties. And Hezbollah has been firing waves of rockets at the points of the Israeli military when it tries to advance into Kafr Tibnit and to the Ali al-Tahir Hills area. They launch not just a few waves, but in some cases 11 waves of rocket fire towards the Israelis as they're attempting to advance. And also we've been looking, and we'll look more at the FPV drone operations, the first-person view drone operations. But Hezbollah has pulled out its heavier weapons, its guided anti-tank missiles, and also even ballistic missiles to hit Israeli military vehicles and positions. So we're going to get into all of that. We're going to show, as a disclaimer, before we get into the footage that's been coming out of Lebanon, and everything you are going to see here has come out since Monday, since our last stream, is of course not an endorsement of this content. It is for the viewers and educational purposes. And as a reminder to everyone, we are 100% viewer funded as a show, and we are currently looking for 300 new members to keep this news show alive. So if you do like what you're seeing here, you want to keep this show on the air, you can join MintPress on Patreon or right here on YouTube and join our membership program. That being said, we are going to get into the first batch of videos that have been released. So again, most of the footage you're going to see here is from around the Beaufort Castle area, and most of the real battles that have been taking place there. So the Israelis issued these evacuation orders, and they wanted people to move above the Zahrani rather than the Litani river. They wanted to ethnically cleanse an even bigger chunk. Here you see them smashing into an Israeli military vehicle. And, it's expensive for these vehicles to just be taken out time and time again by these FPV drones. And all day, all night, these drones are hitting their targets, just dozens and dozens of them being thrown in all different directions. That's why we've got so much footage coming out, because, of course, these drones come with their cameras, as well as their fiber optic cables. And so we can see precisely what they're hitting. And we're actually seeing, and I'll show that in a minute, some civilians heading back to their homes. And on the road, on the way there, or in some cases wedged into their home, are destroyed Israeli military vehicles that have been hit by these FPV drones, which is quite interesting to see. So we will get into that. Again, what we're seeing here from these quadcopter FPV drones, the nets have been put up and again failed to make any impact on Hezbollah's ability to hit the weak point here in this armored personnel carrier. And that drone, by the way, it's important to note, that drone in specific was noted by the Israeli media. They released this, that it carried a warhead, armor-piercing warhead, instead of the typical RPG warhead that has been used primarily by Hezbollah. They started using more sophisticated armor-piercing rounds that are attached to the FPV drone. So this is making them more effective against Israeli military vehicles. Of course, if you hit the tracks of one of these vehicles, you can still damage it, and you can still destroy the vehicles, especially those Jeeps, those Humvees that the Israelis have that you see them target, or these like excavators, for example, which you're seeing the drone target here. And again, these excavators, not all of them are actually belong to Israel. A lot of those belong to private individuals because the Israelis have built a private industry around demolishing the villages of southern Lebanon and the homes of Palestinians and apartment blocks of Palestinians in Gaza. So there's a whole private industry behind this. So-called Israeli civilians are implicated in the ethnic cleansing of Lebanon and the demolition of homes. That, again, there, another troop carrier struck. And it appears like they put mounds of dirt on the top of the tank in order to shield it. So if an FPV drone tries to target that part of the armored troop carrier, perhaps they believe that's going to block it from penetrating the armor at the weak point and killing the troops inside, or very badly injuring them. Here, targeting again right above the turret of a Merkava tank. And completely useless, the netting there. But the Israelis claim that, they're having a little bit of success with these nets. We've seen very, very, very little proof that they're effective at all. But again, they're still looking for solutions. We heard that there was supposed to be a magical solution 2 weeks ago. Netanyahu was teasing, and that solution hasn't yet come. And what's interesting here is that that they do have, like there's two targets. There's that armored personnel carrier, and then there is the regular armored vehicle, and they go after the weaker target there because it appears as if the munition on that FPV drone is more capable of taking out that vehicle. So that appears to be the reason why they've targeted that. And we've seen as time goes on, because they were targeting lots of tanks at the start, they're wanting to fully destroy vehicles now. So they're using the correct weapons for destroying what they want to go after. And then in other cases, of course, they damage vehicles as well, which is still effective because they're taken off the battlefield, But again, this is constant, and the Israeli soldiers have to deal with the buzzing of drones and have to shield themselves inside and make sure that they're nowhere to be seen. And even if they stay in a fixed position, Hezbollah has proven they can operate these drones. And here you see the drone almost flies into the netting, and then it dive bombs down into the armored personnel carrier. And here is Fort Castle, the area that the Israelis were so incredibly proud that they had taken, claimed it as some kind of strategic victory, only for it to become a death trap for their soldiers and tanks, make them more vulnerable to these kinds of attacks. And there it looks like the hatch on this armored personnel carrier is actually open as well. So those clips of from the FPV drone attacks, all of them have come out since Monday. Bear in mind as well, Hezbollah has been still committing many operations every day and engaging in fierce clashes with the Israelis. In fact, yesterday, the Israeli media reported that it was the most deadly day in the last 2 months for their forces in southern Lebanon. So that gives you a little bit of insight into how bad it is on the ground for the Israelis, because Hezbollah, since the memorandum of understanding was announced, hasn't been publicly announcing its daily operations in the way that it was before, but it's still doing them. And we have quite a bit of evidence of that. Another thing that I wanted to show here was that Hezbollah are pulling out its arsenal of missiles as well, and not to strike targets in occupied Palestine. You know, they're not firing these at Haifa or anything like that. They're firing these missiles at Israeli soldier gatherings at short distances away from where they are. And they're targeting them with precision. And you rarely hear much coming out from the Israeli media, or they'll just talk about a serious security incident, but they won't follow up on it, and you won't know what actually happens. And all those serious and critical injuries that are reported, that the soldiers are in serious condition or critical condition, there's just never any follow-up. They never admit what happens to them in the end. But these are the sort of munitions. It's not just Katyusha rockets. You know, they're firing missiles at their positions. So, and this missile was fired at Qantara. So these two missiles. So they're around the clock. They're launching these sort of strikes with missiles. They do have cruise missiles that they've used, ballistic missiles. They have a variety of different drones that they use, and then they do have rockets. And the rockets right now, they'll fire literally within the past 24 hours. They've done a few of these attacks where they'll do 9 to 11 waves of rockets. So those rocket launchers, you know, you have like 12 rockets in them, for example, in some of them, and they'll launch 11 or 9 waves of these rockets at Israeli military positions. And we've seen over the past few days, here you see that guided missile being fired at an Israeli tank. And this is what people are recording for themselves. This is not Hezbollah. And here you see the vehicle burning in the distance. And again, this is what civilians in Lebanon are recording. And here's someone that came back to their home, like I was describing before, who discovered this tank destroyed next to his house, or, you know, right into his house. And then here there is, Southerners driving back to their villages, and they're confronted with scenes like you're going to see here of Israeli tank tracks just on the side of the roads. And this is becoming normal. Lots of people are reporting this. You know, they head back towards the south and they're entering these areas, and this is what they're seeing left behind. Fast forward here. So this is what they're seeing. The Israelis, obviously, you know, when a tank is damaged, they'll have to tow that tank out. They have to tow it away. Here's some more photographs. This one here is from earlier today, when Israel's attempt to advance beyond Arnun. It was advancing forward, again, trying to take the high point, the hills overlooking Nabatea. And these are photos coming out from locals showing their tanks and their armored personnel carriers burning. And they're being hit. This is Israeli air defense fire, because round after round of rockets are heading towards them. And the Israelis now, when they're trying to advance like this, they're getting hit with anti-tank guided munitions, these ATGMs. They're firing Cornet rockets, I heard today reported, which are the Russian system that they're firing at their tanks, taking them out. They also have planted strategically IEDs on these routes, because they know the routes before Israel is going to come through and try and advance. So they detonated a number of IEDs. In one case, I believe against the Jevati brigade, they injured 10, and Israel said that there were 7 of them that were seriously injured, which to me says that probably means 7 of them were killed. And so, some people they're asking, oh yeah, we don't see the aftermath always. In some cases, the FPV drone videos, we do see the aftermath because they'll use a second drone. So we'll see the aftermath. We'll see a tank or an armored personnel carrier burning. So we can confirm what happened to it 100%. But in other cases, a lot of people are skeptical. Okay, how bad are vehicles being hit? How bad are Israel's losses? And I wanted to pull this up. This article is from Plus 972 Mag. This came out yesterday. And this is a freedom of information request because this is an Israeli media outlet. Obviously, they're not widely read amongst Israelis and not exactly supported amongst the Israeli population, this outlet. However, they do these investigations, and they've revealed a number of the AI systems that have been used. But they revealed that around 15 articles a day are blocked from being published in the Israeli media by the Israeli military censor. And that is not even covering, they're talking about Israel's war with Iran. This is from last year. This is not even including this year. But last year, this is the average for last year. And of course, there's obviously going to be a spike during that 12-day war period. But that's what they do. When something in terms of news, and so people are aware of this, and they mention it here, they say Israeli law requires media outlets to submit articles dealing with issues of quote unquote security to the censor, because they have an Israeli military censor that's there for the media for review prior to publication in line with the emergency regulations enacted following Israel's founding that remain in place today. So they have in place these emergency regulations. Israel has emergency regulations where the media has to submit to the military their stories if it contains any sensitive information in order for it to be cleared for publishing. So, and I've seen a lot of complaining by Israeli journalists who say we just cannot talk about what's going on in Lebanon. We can't admit the kind of ambushes that are carried out against our forces. We've had to hide lots of things. And of course they have, and you see them complaining about this quite frequently, actually. And during the war with Iran, the 40-day period, nothing could come out. And the lying got so bad that they thought that they could lie again when Iran struck back after they bombed Beirut a few weeks back. And the satellite imagery revealed that Ramat David Air Base was struck directly. And Iran hit their target. But at the time, Israel says everything fell in open areas. And during the war, they would claim that it was only foreign workers that were getting killed by the missiles that were falling somehow, miraculously. No Israeli Jews died. They were Syrians. I remember the start of the war as well, there were Syrian Druze that had signed up for the Israeli military, and one of them had died fighting in South Lebanon. And they looked, see, the only person that died is the Syrian Druze. And this is the way that they behave. Just to make clear, this article is not covering anything of what I've just said here, right? This is just talking about from a freedom of information request submitted to the Israelis, and they've revealed how many stories they've censored. 15 stories a day censored by the Israeli military. And the Israeli media cannot report freely. That's the thing. There is no real press freedom there. Because, again, we'll hear, and it's normally that we get the most information from Israeli Telegram groups that start sharing stuff about what's happened, right? We'll hear there was 15 casualties here, and we saw people go into a hospital, and you'll see these people talking about it, right? And then that gets shared around everywhere else, and things get lost in translation, I guess, sometimes. But to get an accurate depiction of just how many Israeli casualties there are, very difficult. But the Israelis have they've admitted at this point in the south of Lebanon that there is about over 1,400 Israeli soldier casualties. Now, considering what I just showed you here, that the Israeli media, it's not a free media because 15 articles a day get censored by the Israeli military censor. And over there, you have to, the law requires media outlets to submit articles dealing with issues of security. So basically anything to do with Lebanon or Iran or anything that's going to be doing to do with strikes that Iran is conducting with its ballistic missiles against Israeli military positions or sensitive targets. Hezbollah, how many Israeli soldiers have been killed and injured, and all of the different incidents. They're security issues. They even call them, we know it's security that it comes under, the category that it falls under, because Israel calls it a security incident, a serious security incident. That's what the term is when there's a casualty event amongst its soldiers in either Lebanon or Gaza. And so nothing can be reported without going through this military censor. So if they're admitting 1,400 casualties, you can imagine how high the casualty count actually is. You could imagine how many armored personnel carriers, how many Jeeps, how many Humvees, how many Merkava tanks have actually been destroyed. The extent of the damage is enormous. I mean, we have enough video evidence for this, but realistically, they're censoring a lot. There's a lot of reports that come out. There's no follow-up on it. And we even have video footage of attacks that the Israelis haven't admitted any casualties for. That frequently happens. Almost every single episode we do, we're showing FPV drone operations or other operations targeting Israeli positions or vehicles, and Israel doesn't have a report of what actually happened to the crew. Some of them that you're seeing are vehicles, clearly they're not occupied, but a lot of them are. We've seen them take out convoys, and the casualty count doesn't match. So that is something that I believe everyone should be aware of, that the Israelis are most certainly lying about their casualties that they're suffering. That being said, there is another video, which we've shown before, but I feel like this summarizes Israel's military operations and Israel's war on Iran quite well, down to a T. And I believe it's just the ultimate summary of Israel's successes against Iran and its ability to wage regime change. Just gonna get that one more time. So, just as I'm saying all of this, Israel has also ramped up some of its strikes against the Gaza Strip. And although, of course, on the ground, they are getting battered by Hezbollah, there is no explicit inclusion of Gaza in the Memorandum of Understanding. And Iran has not threatened to respond to what Israel does in the Gaza Strip. But there is always the chance that things could escalate there. You'll see at the current moment that all of these AIPAC stooges and your media personalities like Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin and all these weasels, quite frankly, that are advocating for more war, they're very angry and they're crashing out. And some people have asked, oh, well, because they're getting so angry and because they're crashing out and, you see them, little Benjamin is talking about, well, we need to have more war. Well, like that's what he always does. That's what little Benjamin does. But addressing all of that, and some people have said, because people like Mark Levin and these AIPAC people and Ben Shapiro are now, coming out, and we've even got Mike Pence, right, coming out and sort of condemning Trump's deal and all of this, that this means that the deal is really bad and that Netanyahu is getting put in his place by Trump, and Trump has decided to go against Israel. I don't think that's the case because I've seen them overreact to things before. And these are media personalities that I don't know who they're convincing at this point, but they're going to ask for war no matter what. And then you have Trump loyalists who are, just follow him, whatever he says. But these types, their interests are Israel's interests, and their interests are aligned with Benjamin Netanyahu. So they're going to back him. That's their camp, even amongst the Israelis internally, right? So the Israelis will put out a number of different things internally and birth certain theories about Netanyahu. For example, the Israeli opposition media came up with this idea that Benjamin Netanyahu is responsible for funding Hamas and propping up Hamas, which is just objectively false, right? But they came up with it. If you go back and you want to cite all the sources, the people that start accusing Netanyahu of being the one behind that are, again, like Netanyahu funded Hamas. Netanyahu didn't fund Hamas. Qatar did, and they allowed money to come in. And you guess who else did it? The Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid also allowed those briefcases full of cash to come in. I've gone into this whole subject of Hamas before and how that money came in, why, and all the ins and outs of it in other episodes. So I'm not going to cover that now, but they'll just push stuff like that. So they scapegoat Netanyahu and his administration for everything, including stuff they engage in themselves, right? But there is that loyalist camp to sort of Netanyahu and that side of things. And you see that in the United States. A lot of them are very angry. And of course, they're angry because they wanted regime change in Iran. They wanted Iran to be a failed state. They wanted Iran to break up into sectarian regimes. They wanted Iran to be like Syria is right now, quite frankly. No money, poor as can be. Maybe you lift the sanctions, doesn't really make a difference when you got people who are just so incredibly corrupt running the show and nothing functions. And then you've got militias running in the street trying to kill this ethnicity and the other ethnicity, and everyone is shabiha and blah, 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 and whatever, right? Obviously in Iran, it wouldn't be the same terms used, but that's what they want. They want everyone. They want Libya. They want the aftermath, the immediate aftermath of the war on Iraq and the sectarian war that happened there. That's what they want for Iran. Whether you love him or hate him, it doesn't matter. That's what I'm talking about Iran here and the Iranian government. Doesn't matter what your perspective is on the Iranian government, like it didn't matter what your perspective was on the Iraqi government under Saddam Hussein or the Syrian government or the Libyan government, because these people just want to see death and destruction. And I don't think it indicates a whole lot about whether a situation is one way or another. That's my personal perspective. But one thing I will say about these people, when you're seeing them advocate for war, and what I do here is I do cover the events and the battlefield because I believe it does actually factor into a wider political analysis. I don't believe that you can understand what is going on in the region without understanding the realities of the battlefield. You have to understand what's going on. If you don't have any connection to it, then how are you going to know who's got the upper hand in the negotiations? You just can't unless you actually know what is going on, right? So some people look at that and they see that, well, because you're showing this is sort of almost hawkish in a way, right? And I'll tell you what, it's not hawkish. These people and their advocacy, these whiny little weasels who have never seen war, because all they want is destruction, all they want is death, all they want is to see people blown up everywhere and Israel to be and they've never suffered, they've never touched war has never touched their families, they've never had to see the bullets hit children, they've never had to go to the hospitals and witness the mothers and the fathers grieving over their dead children. They've never had to see that. They've never been shot at. Because when you go and see that for yourself, and when members of your own family and friends of yours have been killed in war, your perspective is a little bit different. But these people don't understand that. They don't get it. They're weasels. And that's why I don't talk about them a lot. But in this context, just to address whether their opinions and them crashing out has any bearing on what is actually going on between the Israeli and the American governments, it is important to note these people have no experience with it. They don't understand. They've never these are not people that will go and fight for what they believe. They're cowards. And of course they want more war, sitting in their, air-conditioned studios, raking in, millions and millions, and talking at all at the expense of innocent people who are living in the ruins of their bombed out buildings. These are just supremacist losers. And I don't think many people, and they're just losers. They don't know anything about what's going on, really. They just know their propaganda talking points, and they're a bunch of supremacists. That's all they are. And the only reason, again, anyone listens to them is because they're connected enough. They have a show on Fox News or their network is promoted. They're certainly not making money. And their connections as well to power is not what everyone may think. But if you've actually seen war, if you know about it, these people whining, oh, the Israelis suffered so much. If you had actually seen war and you've been touched by war and you've seen what comes out of that, that would make you not want to have any more of it. So that's what happens to you. The last few years has been like that for anyone that is close to what's going on. Even if you're not close, you don't have to be. But for people that are, over the past few years, it's been every single morning waking up with a black cloud over your head, hoping that someone else doesn't die. And these people don't know that. They don't understand that, and they don't care. They hope that more people are killed. It's a video game for them. So these people are losers. They're not relevant, in my opinion. And I like to laugh at them crashing out and getting angry over the fact that more people aren't being killed unnecessarily for Israel's so-called Greater Israel project. And I might state here, and I said it on the last show, assuming that this goes through, and at the end, Iran comes out the victor here, and this, even if this memorandum of understanding is to go through, Iran has won, Israel has lost, and the Greater Israel project is done. And you know who else said that as well a few days ago? Sheikh Naim Qassem, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, also made that point that the Greater Israel project has been defeated. And so, assuming that Israel is not going to use this all as an excuse and the Americans are coming up with some sort of conspiracy to turn this all around and go back to war again. And I believe even if they do, they're not going to come out as victors, because the only pathway Israel has here, right, is to get the United States, use the United States military to go after Iran's infrastructure. Then the Gulf's going to be blown up. And then the Israelis are going to take hits too. And just keep doing that until one of two things happen. Either the Israelis get to a point where they can't take it any longer. They've just taken so much punishment that they cannot tolerate any more pain. And so they beg the United States to give up. Or they start using nuclear weapons, in which case they're going to be completely eliminated as well. It's mutually assured destruction. So those are the options if Israel wants to continue. If not, Israel has been effectively defeated. The one question mark here is what it will do to the Palestinians. And that is a big question mark, because then that could throw everything back to the beginning. We're back to square one. So we'll continue to monitor everything that's going on. Right now, there is a battle that's being waged. Hezbollah is firing waves of rockets, I believe, at Israeli forces as they're attempting to advance. Again, they're attempting to advance. They're not withdrawing, despite the agreement. And if they don't, Iran has explicitly threatened to respond with missile fire against them. So we'll see how that goes, and we will keep you informed. And for everybody that has been tuning in here, of course, we hope to see you again We're going to be back here covering everything as it develops. The next episode is on Monday. But if you did like this stream and you're here, you've got this far, please do hit that like button. Please share. Put a comment underneath as well. Help us out in the algorithm. Do subscribe as well, or follow us, depending upon where you are watching this from. And we do have a membership drive, and we're looking for 300 new members in order to just keep this show alive, to keep doing this, to keep bringing you these breakdowns, to as well share with you information and videos, footage that you're not going to see in the corporate media. So you can join us here on YouTube in our membership program, or you can join MintPress on Patreon and be part of the reason why this show continues, and why as alternative media we can continue to cover these topics and bring you genuine analysis to try and help everyone make sense of this in the best way possible. So thank you to everyone for being here today, and we will see you again 4 p.m. CST on Monday. Thank you.